Hello, and welcome back to Your Story is Your Portal. And today we are going to go deeper into the reasons why people don't write books and the reason why people are resistant to telling their story. Most people, in my experience, come from that place of thinking that their story isn't interesting enough, or they think that their writing isn't good enough, or they think that they don't have the ability to tell their story, or that it's simply just not interesting enough. This misconception about stories is something that I've been dealing with for pretty much 17 years, the whole time that I've been working, helping people with their stories and publish books. I think the main misconception that people have is that, quite simply, a book is not a product. A book is a soul contract. It's an opportunity for us to really delve into our life and our life journey and really explore what those life lessons have taught us and how it ultimately leads to us understanding what our true soul purpose is. But most people don't think of a book that way. They think of it as basically a product. It's not, it doesn't necessarily have a purpose. This was something that perhaps I also had that perception before I actually wrote my own book. So I never had a plan to write a book or be an author or a writer, and certainly not to be a publisher. My career in England before I left to go traveling was all about product development. Isn't that funny? It was about product development. And so when I, of course, first came to the idea of writing a book, I thought of the book as a product. And when I first created my curriculum to teach people how to write books, that is the way that I approached it, that a book was a product. And in classic product development, what you do is you reverse engineer the product that you're going to be developing. And so the first thing you say is, what does the customer want? Where is there a gap in the market? And then you create a product to fill that gap. So I thought, well, I can do the same with a book. A book is a product, right? And all we need to do is say, okay, who needs this book? Who needs this information? Who is the reader? And then we develop the book and we write the book for the reader. So with the customer in mind, that's what we do. And of course, that came from my experience as a product manager and a product development manager, creating new products, albeit in the bath and beauty industry. But still the principles, as far as I was concerned, were exactly the same. And so that is how I came to create the curriculum to write books based on that experience of product development. Now, I never considered that I would write my own book. What actually happened was I went traveling around the world. And so I left England in 1998. I basically threw away my career in product development, and I decided that I was going to go and look for a more interesting life. I ended up sailing around the world and traveling pretty much nonstop for 7 years. Now, in that time, I was writing letters to my grandma. So my grandma had said to me, I would love you to share your experience. And because she was living in a home for the elderly, she wanted to share those letters with everybody else that was in the facility. And so it turned out that over a 4-year period, that my grandma made it quite the event when my letters came from around the world and everybody gathered so that my grandma could tell my story to all of the residents. So when I eventually returned to England 7 years later from when I first set off on that trip, I went to see my grandma and she said to me, Julie, I have saved all of your letters that you sent to me. And she opened a huge big drawer, old-fashioned kind of wardrobes that you have in England. It's very large. And it was completely full of my letters. And she had saved all of my letters. And she said, now you have to go write a book. And of course, my reaction was, oh, me write a book? No, I'm not a writer. I'm not good enough. My grammar and my spelling are terrible. And she said to me, your stories inspired everybody in this building so much. They became armchair travelers, listening to your own experience of traveling around the world. And you cannot believe the difference you made in their life by inviting them to travel with you by writing those letters. So now you have an obligation to share that with more people. Well, she put that idea in my head and I thought to myself, well, that's still a huge project and I wouldn't know where to start writing a book. But as it turned out, I went to England and during that time, I decided to emigrate to Canada. So I flew to Canada and I had 1 year before I was permitted to work. I couldn't even do volunteer work because those were the rules of immigration and residency. And I didn't want to risk being caught. So I thought, maybe this is a good time to be writing that book. And so I delved into the whole project of writing a book. I didn't know anything about it. And so I went onto the internet. I did as many workshops. I listened to as many podcasts or blogs or anything that I could find about how to get started on writing a book. And I discovered that there was a way where I could use my letters and I could use excerpts from the letters together with my journal notes to put together a travelogue, if you like, a memoir of my travels. And so that's what I did. In the meantime, I had learned that, as many people have the perception, you need to find a book publisher because unless you have a book publisher, then there's no point in writing a book. So I delved into that world. I learned how to write book proposals and I realized that my story was actually quite interesting because I had been traveling around the world for 7 years. So, it's one of those typical, oh, that would make a great movie. And of course, it was already done a little bit later with Eat, Pray, Love. Anyway, on that journey, I told myself all of those misconceptions that you find. I don't think my writing is good enough. I don't think my story is interesting enough. I'm really not a great writer. How am I going to afford to publish? How am I going to find a book publisher? What am I going to do once I publish my book? How do I get into the bookstores? Who would want to read my book? Why would it be interesting? All of these things, all of these objections that now I hear from my authors when I first speak to them about writing a book. So I find it very, very interesting that when we talk about your story as being a portal to your life purpose, to your soul purpose, I look at my own story and I realize that now I can look back on my whole journey, that my travel around the world for 7 years ultimately led me to my soul purpose. It wasn't the traveling around the world that led to my soul purpose. It was writing about traveling around the world that ultimately led to my soul purpose. I realized that as a first-time author, I was in a unique position that I could help other people that also wanted to know all about how they get started with writing a book. So I could share everything that I had learned in that first year, and that year that I had spent when I couldn't work, all the workshops I attended, all of the blogs that I read, all of the podcasts that I listened to, helping me to understand how to get started in that journey of writing my book, of writing my story. And of course, then I also went down that path of writing publishing proposals and, of course, getting lots of rejections, which frankly surprised me because I thought, well, of all the research that I did, my story was very unique. And there was already proof of many similar style books about traveling, which would make me believe that my story was something that would be of interest to people. Anyway, now I can look back on all of this and I can realize that everything I experienced, all of those life experiences, ultimately was pointing to this point right now, which is coming to the realization that a book isn't a product. It isn't a product. It is a vehicle, a portal to our soul purpose. And it's literally taken me 15 years to get to that point where I realized this is the significance of a book. You know, some books are products, you know, books that are for entertainment, fiction books that are for entertainment, for example, or business books, how-to books, you know, they are products. But when it comes to non-fiction books, which is the genre that I specialize in helping people with, the book is a portal to your true soul purpose. And it's amazing to think that that is what I've been doing for the last 15 years, helping people. I just hadn't put those clues together to realize that that whole life story was little clues to ultimately what I'm doing now and how I'm helping other people. So really what that helped me to realize is that this is what I do for other people. I'm able to see into the story behind the story. So whilst I am, you know, in my own case, believing that my story around the world was the product, underneath it was the writing of the story around the world that ultimately led to my soul purpose. And without realizing, this is what I was doing for other people. So when I was helping other people with their books, I was delving into their hidden stories, those stories that perhaps they hadn't thought belonged in the book, or that they were an insignificant part of their story. And usually when I uncover those hidden stories, it's when we start to get the clues to the ultimate soul purpose of those stories. So in conclusion, travel was basically my portal to help others understand their own true life purpose through the stories, through the life that they've lived and the experiences that they have lived, which ultimately helps us to understand why we are all here. So my soul contract is to help other people understand that stories and books are not just products. They're not just a business card. It's what I used to say all the time, that a book is a business card. It's a way to advertise your knowledge and your expertise. And now I realize that knowledge and expertise ultimately is our soul contract. It's the knowledge and the expertise that we have been picking up as we go along in our life story. And that knowledge and expertise ultimately is what is our soul contract and our soul purpose, to help other people by sharing that knowledge. So I hope that I have helped you a little bit to reframe the importance of our stories, to reframe for you and to change your mindset about what is a book, what is the purpose of a book, and why should you write a book. So the misconception that books are just a product, that is what I'm talking about here. And I'm talking about changing your mindset, changing the way that you look at a book. A book is not about selling loads of books and making money, or making a movie out of your book, or creating a 200-page business card, as I used to say. Think of the book as a collection of your life stories that ultimately, when you work with me, will help you to understand what your true soul contract is and why you have lived all of those life experiences. Think of the book as a mirror on your own life, a mirror on your own experiences. And my role is to reflect back those stories to you, to reflect back that mirror, and to help you see ultimately what the purpose of those stories are, and why ultimately it leads to your own soul contract and your own soul purpose. So I hope you enjoyed that little summary of a different way of looking at books, a different way to look at the whole topic of books and the whole topic and importance of sharing our stories. In our next episode, we're going to delve even a little bit deeper into this topic. And then I will be interviewing people about how they have discovered their own true soul purpose by sharing their story and by writing books. So until then, I hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for walking through today's portal. I invite you to subscribe, share, and join me inside the House of Story Medicine for deeper journeys, book mentorship, and soul story retreats in Mexico. Because your voice matters.
I'm Michelle Abraham, founder of the High Vibe Podcast Network, and we're honored to have Julianne's show, Your Story is Your Portal, as part of our network family. For more inspiring shows like this one, visit highvibepodcastnetwork.com, and don't forget to grab your free gifts from our hosts in the gift vault. Stay high vibe and keep sharing your life.